Kia ora, it's Mrs. Kenton here. I'm going to explain to you how to set up your refill page when you're doing a redox problem. So this part at the top is, let me just grab a pen. This part at the top here, this is the part that's usually given to you in the question, and so you don't tend to have to write that out again, but I put it here just so that it was there for this problem. So you'll notice that I have one half equation here, the other half equation here, and I always put the whole equation directly underneath because I find it easier to work with the two half equations as I'm working out how to write my whole equation, and then I put the explanation underneath all of that. It doesn't actually matter where you put them, it's just that I find it easier for my thinking. You'll notice that there are quite a few lines I've left when I've written this half equation here. On the top, the first half equation, there's quite a few lines on the refill that I've left empty. And then I've written my second half equation, and then I've left a line, and I've written my third half equation, or a couple of lines. And that's because I like to put the colour changes, the observations, underneath my half equations, because the color changes or the observations that you make have to be linked to the species that they belong to, and I find it easier to put them under the half equations. However, some people find it easier to write it here in the explanation. It doesn't matter where you put it, it just matters that you put it somewhere and that the observation or the color changes are directly linked to the species that they belong to. So that's where I put them. So that's one of the reasons why I have so many lines in between my half equations and my full equation. The other reason I have quite a few lines is because when I'm working out my oxidation numbers, these oxidation numbers are pretty simple, but when I'm working out my oxidation numbers, sometimes you need to have that little workout space in underneath, and this gives you that ability to have that space without crowding into lines below where stuff is already written. I also like to put in straight away whether a half equation is redox or oxidation. And remember, we get that from our oxidation numbers changing, and also we get that from whether or not we have lost electrons or gained electrons. And so I like to put that up over here on the side because it helps me to not get muddled when I'm writing the explanation. And you know, because you've been trying this, that it's really easy to get muddled between describing reduction and describing that something is an oxidant. So remember that the oxidant, that's bad color, isn't it? So let's choose a different color. The oxidant, because it has this suffix on the end of it, that's a noun. And so it's the name of a species that we apply to a species. If it's oxidation, and it has this suffix, or oxidized, and it has this suffix, they are both verbs, which is an action, which means that they have undergone oxidation, and action has happened to that substance. But this is the substance that causes this. Okay, so I like to keep these words up here. It helps me keep it straight in my mind. So when I'm writing that the hydrogen ion is the oxidant, I know it's the oxidant because it caused the copper metal to be oxidized. So that's how I remember it. I also like to leave one or two gaps, lines in here between my two explanations in case I forgot something and I have to go back and write it in.